Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about a new film from director Sean Baker of the Florida Project. He's done another indie film here that's getting a lot of award buzz right now, and that is the film Anora. This film stars Mikey Madison from Scream 5 and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and a bunch of other things that she's been a part of. And essentially sees this nightclub dancer that works at this gentleman's club and kind of falls for this guy that speaks mostly just English and Russian. And the two of them eventually get to the point where they want to start dating outside of the club that that the Mikey Madison character works for. Her character is referred to as Annie throughout the movie. And as their relationship blossoms, it eventually gets to the point where the guy even offers Annie, the Mikey Madison character, I want you to be my girlfriend for a full week. So he pays her in advance and all this other stuff, and they go on this huge trip together. She gets to meet a lot of his friends. And then after that trip is done with, it gets to the point where this guy who's a part of this wealthy Russian family, he basically tells Annie that he has to go back to Russia to work for his dad for a while, and the only way he can get out of it is if he marries an American woman. And so Mikey Madison, I'll probably just refer to her as that throughout the rest of the review. Um, she basically agrees to the marriage. They basically have a Vegas wedding, and they think their life is going to go perfect. They think everything's going great. And then one day, out of nowhere, someone from this guy's family finds out that he had this Vegas wedding, and his family is totally not okay with this. And so their worlds go completely downhill. They want them to annul the marriage. They want them to, make sure all the divorce papers are filled out immediately. They do not want this marriage at all. They want nothing to do with this Annie character. And so throughout the rest of this movie, the guy even goes missing when he finds out that his family really disapproves of this. And so they have to track him down, and Annie has to go with them. And it's nothing but a crash and burn journey from here on out between this Annie character that married this Russian guy and this Russian guy that's now in huge trouble with his family for doing such this quick marriage that they really don't approve of at all. But overall, guys, I thought Anora was a good movie. It's not a great movie. There's things about it that I admire, that I enjoy, but there's a lot of negatives along the way that keep this from being a great movie for me. I do admire Sean Baker. I've seen a lot of interviews with him. I've seen a lot of his takes on how cinema should be handled, how cinema should go moving forward. And I agree with a lot of the things that he says and does. And I even agree with a lot of the films that he took inspiration from to make Anora. I think he said The French Connection was one of those movies. And you can definitely see a lot of that when like the film is in motion throughout the movie. You can see a lot of French Connection in there, along with some other films that he took inspiration from to make this film. I think he's a very admirable director. It's just one of those films where I left kind of cold and depressed after watching it because it does go down such a dark journey. After seeing two people being so happy with each other, it does go down a very, very dark path that isn't exactly going to be for everybody. So for my positives and negatives of Anora, I did appreciate the filmmaking. I did appreciate how Sean Baker chose to make his films, what inspirations he took from other movies that came up previously, the color palette he used, the locations he used, the way he really made it felt like this kid and his family had a lot of money, and that Annie kind of went along on this journey with him. Even how they managed to make it feel like this long stretch of time passed without how they're trying to find this kid and how they're going to annul the marriage and stuff like that. I just really appreciated the filmmaking here. It really is a well-made movie, even if it's not necessarily the best movie to watch necessarily. But I do appreciate the filmmaking that was on display here. I also like how the film sets the mood as to the scenes that are about to be very happy for these characters, as well as the scenes that are going to be very sad and upsetting for these characters. So Sean Baker definitely sets the mood of, bright and colorful, very happy, with the music and everything like that. And then when the film gets sad and goes into darker territories, it does feel kind of gloomy, and the lighting feels kind of off. And, all the characters kind of feel washed out a little bit in a way with the lighting, and like even the use of music and the absence of music definitely add to those scenes for sure. So I liked how he set the mood of this movie, whether it is the scenes that are supposed to be darker, or the scenes that are supposed to help us feel good and happy for this couple that we're watching. I also did think there was some good dramatic performances here. Like Mikey Madison does give a great performance here. So if she does get nominated for an Oscar, I think she deserves it. I think it's a very good performance. You definitely understand her side of things whenever she's upset about something or when she's happy about something, and you really want to root for her to achieve that happiness that she's going for. And obviously, like the performance of the boyfriend and the really mean family members that really don't want this marriage to happen. Like I said, it's a good dramatic performance from a lot of these actors and actresses. So as far as drama goes, I think you'll get that out of Anora. Like the drama feels real in this movie. I also just never felt bored with this film. I always felt very engaged with it, whether it is learning about Annie's life or learning about how she feels about certain things, whether it is feeling invested in this couple and wanting them to be together even after this family really disapproves of it and want the marriage annulled. I just always felt engaged what was going on. I wanted the best possible scenario to happen for these characters, which unfortunately doesn't always happen for some of these characters. But I always felt engaged, and I never felt bored throughout this film. So that's always a plus for a film like this. And overall, too, I liked how the romance was handled. It really did feel like these two were really kind of enamored with each other, whether it was Annie and the guy or their friendships and relationships with family and stuff like that. I did like how the romance did kind of feel real between the two of them, and so one day when kind of all goes to hell, it really kind of is heartbreaking to see such a beautiful thing that was blossoming so quickly turned into something so dark and depressing. And then for my positives and negatives, or more so my negatives now, there's also a mixed category I have for this film, just because it's kind of not bad or good. It's just kind of something good to know going into this movie, so it kind of fits into the mixed category. This film is definitely meant to be an experience. It's definitely meant to be, romantic at the beginning while being kind of dark and depressing in the second half. So kind of go into this film knowing that it's not really meant to be a film to be enjoyed necessarily. That's definitely kind of the vibe I got out of this movie. It's definitely meant to be an experience. So kind of take that comment as you will, whether you do view that as a positive or a negative. This film I do feel is kind of just meant to be an experience, not necessarily something that's meant to be enjoyed necessarily. But for my negatives of this movie, overall, my first and foremost negative here is the film did make me feel kind of cold and depressed. It really did. Yeah, sure, Sean Baker's trying to reveal the curtain of, what a one night stand could really, how awful it really could go if something like this were to happen, after the one night stand occurred and stuff like that. Um, but I never, kind of like, well, Stephen King even kind of brought this up at a convention somewhere. He said, I never like to make the audience feel cold after the story is done. You can go in dark directions, you can go in a dark place, end on a dark note, that's fine, but you don't want them to feel cold by the time the story is finished. And I kind of wish Sean Baker kind of had that Stephen King idea in his mind when making this movie, because it did feel, I just kind of felt awful by the time the film was done with, and I just kind of left the film on a sour note. And though I, admired all the stuff that I liked about it and stuff that came before it that I enjoyed, by the time the film was over with, I just felt kind of cold and depressed from the whole thing. And also, another thing too about this film is a lot of scenes are meant to kind of feel annoying and unlikable. Specifically, when stuff really bad goes down with this family that doesn't want this marriage to happen. There's this long stretch of time of Annie getting hurt and tied up and all this other awful stuff. And it just felt kind of annoying and unlikable. It just kind of felt like people screaming at each other for a while, and that doesn't necessarily make the most entertaining film, at least not for me anyway. I also thought some of the editing was kind of choppy. There's just some occasional choppy editing here where you could tell that they didn't like a certain take on something, so what they did is they kind of took what was working, took a certain part of the clip out, inserted a part that felt more fitting. And you can definitely tell that because there's like scenes where we follow Annie around at work at the beginning, and like she's talking to a friend, and clearly it cuts mid sentence to like something else that they're talking about. So clearly that was another clip that was inserted later in the editing room. Even stuff like when she's taking clients at this club that she's working at, we don't really have like smooth transitions from client to client. It's just kind of she goes off to this one client here, they go into this other room there, they go here, they go there, and there's not really like a smooth transition from place to place when things like that happen. So for me personally, I thought some of the editing was a little choppy here. And overall, too, the film does kind of run out of things for you to cheer for. It is one of those films where you just kind of have to remind yourself who exactly you're rooting for by the time the film is over with, because there's things about Annie that are kind of not the greatest about her. There's things about this guy that she was trying to marry that definitely revealed later on of things that we really don't like about him. Obviously, this family's awful to her, so we can't root for them for trying to get the marriage annulled. We can't really root for this person that Annie's living with because now she has to deal with Annie again and deal with her nightclub life and all this other stuff. And by the end of the film, I just kind of asked myself, who was I exactly trying to root for here? There's problems with Annie. There's things about her that's not likable. There's things about that guy that she was seeing that wasn't likable either. Obviously, this family was being terrible to her. So at the end of the film, I just was kind of asking myself, who am I exactly cheering for here? And I don't know if the film has a great answer for me at all regarding that. Overall, too, the film does feel a little long. I think it's just because there is a lot of scenes that aren't meant to be enjoyed in it, and it is a 2.5 hour film. I think a good solid 20 minutes could have been trimmed out of this movie without any question at all. I think the film would have remained intact. I think it would have been the exact same film we would have gotten, but a better one and a better runtime. So I thought the film could have been trimmed down by a good 15, 20 minutes or so. And overall, too, the film does feel kind of overly dirty. Yeah, I get it. There's scenes that take place in gentlemen's clubs. There's scenes where people doing drugs. There's scenes of violence, scenes of this. Definitely earns its R rating. I'm kind of shocked it wasn't NC-17. But it's just one of those movies where you just kind of want to sanitize yourself by the time it's done with this, because everything you're being exposed to is just extremely dirty and kind of gross after a while. But overall, I'm going to give Anora an 8 out of 10. I think it's a good movie. I think it's a well-made movie, even if it's not necessarily a film I would necessarily go back and rewatch again. Like I said, tons of admirable things about it. Mikey Madison, I'm sure, is going to get an Oscar for her performance here. But there is a lot of negatives here. And I think first and foremost, I never have ever watched a film where I wanted to leave cold and depressed from it. And I think Anora kind of found a way to do that. So 8 out of 10 for me. See it with caution. If you like Sean Baker's other work, if you're kind of intrigued by this film and going into it knowing that it's more of an experience than a film that's meant to be enjoyed, I think you'll have an okay time with this movie. It's not a film you can necessarily rush out to go see. I don't know if it'll win Best Picture or anything like that, but 8 out of 10 for me. A well-made movie that I not necessarily enjoy watching at times, but well-made enough where I will give it an 8 out of 10 for its admirable qualities.